Hi everyone, I'm Tawny Stone, and welcome to Crime Enigma. On March 12th, a shadow of unease fell over Vancouver, Washington, when police received a call from a deeply worried grandmother. Her daughter, 27-year-old Meshay Melendez, and her beloved 6-year-old granddaughter, Layla, had gone missing. Meshay was a devoted single mother, and young Layla was, by all accounts, her entire world. There was no obvious reason for them to suddenly abscond without informing their close-knit family. It quickly became clear that something far darker, something sinister, was at play. The family's desperate pleas for information echoed their profound fear. "I'm missing a whole part of me," cried Meshay's sister. "That's my sister, and that's my niece. We don't know where they're at." One of the last people known to have seen Meshay Melendez alive was a man named Kirkland Warren. He was Meshay's ex-boyfriend, and their relationship had been a tumultuous and volatile one. Yet, when questioned, Kirkland claimed they were in the process of working things out, or at least they had been, right up until the point Meshay and her young daughter inexplicably disappeared. A young mother and a vulnerable child had vanished, and it was imperative that police find these two missing persons as quickly as humanly possible. But as their investigations began to unfold, they would soon reveal a twisted history of violence, deceit, and a murder that would leave the community of Vancouver scarred for generations to come. Vancouver, Washington, is one of the state's most populous cities. Situated on the border with Oregon, close to the West Coast, it has a violent crime rate that, at 632 per 1,000 residents, is unfortunately higher than the state average. This backdrop made the disappearance of Meshay Melendez and her daughter in March 2023 all the more concerning. 27-year-old Meshay was last seen with her daughter Layla by a friend in a burgundy Dodge Charger on the morning of March 12th. The driver of this car was identified as Kirkland Warren, her ex-boyfriend. It seemed chillingly likely that he had been the last person to see Meshay and Layla alive. On March 22nd, 2023, 10 days after the disappearance, what might have seemed like an ordinary day inside a Vancouver correctional facility was, for one particular detective, the most important day in this rapidly escalating case. He had been tasked with the critical mission of finding the missing mother and child. He was now sitting at a chess table in an interview room, preparing to question Kirkland Warren, who was incarcerated on unrelated charges. The detective could only hope he'd ask all the right questions to uncover the truth. After reading Warren his Miranda rights, the detective, who specialized in missing persons and digital forensics, began to probe. He mentioned that a mutual friend, Joanne or Joe, had reported seeing Kirkland with Meshay on the night of March 12th. Kirkland confirmed that he, Meshay, and Layla had indeed stayed the night together in Joe's apartment. He claimed there was no talk of Meshay going anywhere specific. They had simply gone to Joe's house because she was a mutual friend, intending to talk and be together, and had slept together that night. He asserted they were meeting to reconcile after some recent drama in their relationship, and that, according to him, everything had gone well that night. He stated they left Joe's house together in the morning as planned. When the detective pressed further, relaying Joe's account that Kirkland and Meshay had left and returned during the night, and then finally left the apartment with Meshay apparently waiting in Kirkland's Dodge Charger, Kirkland corrected him, saying it wasn't nighttime when they finally left, but morning. He claimed Meshay had parked her own car further down the street, and he had simply driven her and Layla over to it. He said he let them out. They drove away. And this, according to Kirkland Warren, was the last time he ever saw the pair alive. Meshay Melendez and her daughter Layla were officially reported missing on March 18th, a full 6 days after their last sighting. Meshay was known as an independent woman with her own life, but she was also a devoted mother who, by all accounts, would never do something so reckless as to disappear without telling her family, especially with her young daughter. She took excellent care of Layla, who often appeared in Meshay's light-hearted TikTok videos, doing dances with her mom. Layla, though only 6, was reportedly doing well in school and had a promising, bright life ahead of her. Meshay herself once lovingly posted, "I don't know how I got blessed with such an amazing daughter." She was deeply beloved by her mom and her mom's entire family, including Meshay's mother, who was Layla's devoted grandmother. When Meshay's mother didn't hear from her daughter or granddaughter all week, a deeply uncharacteristic silence, she frantically called the police. The Vancouver Police Department conducted an initial welfare check on Meshay's apartment, but found no sign of Meshay or Layla. However, the very next day, Meshay's mom, desperately searching for any trace of her missing daughter and granddaughter, made a grim discovery: Meshay's car. It was found abandoned in the Van Mall neighborhood of Vancouver, the very same neighborhood where she and Layla had reportedly stayed with Kirkland Warren on the night of March 11th. Kirkland Warren told investigators he'd tried to contact Meshay on the same day she disappeared. He claimed he went to a bagel shop after supposedly dropping her off, and then to another friend's house, a woman named Nettie. He asserted that Meshay's subsequent absence didn't particularly concern him until she was officially reported missing nearly a week later, a statement that seemed at odds with his claim of a reconciling relationship. Kirkland Warren's own background was far from unblemished. He grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and was the son of a municipal judge who had resigned from his position in 2009 following serious allegations of misconduct, including second-degree forgery, abuse of office, and attempted theft of property. In the last few years, Kirkland had relocated across the country to Vancouver, Washington, where he had married a woman named Monet Tyler Warren. He and Monet had 2 young daughters. Monet, aged 26 in the spring of 2023, worked at a bank in nearby Portland, Oregon. However, she herself had recently been accused of stealing a significant amount of money from customer accounts at the credit union where she was employed, allegedly transferring nearly $25,000 to others. This was not a random, unconnected incident. On November 21, 2022, Monet's work credentials were reportedly used to alter account information at the credit union in order to facilitate theft, and a sum of $20,000 was subsequently transferred into an account opened under the name of Meshay Melendez. Meshay herself was also reportedly seen on surveillance footage opening an account at that same credit union that same month and, significantly, exiting Monet Warren's car. It appeared the 2 women knew each other and may well have been entangled in a criminal financial scheme together, with Kirkland Warren being the common link between them. This troubling financial activity also seemed to coincide with a change in Meshay's online behavior. She had been an active TikTok user, but her last post was on December 20th, right around the time of the alleged thefts from the credit union. She began to go dark online. Perhaps, investigators theorized, trying to minimize her exposure in case of a pending investigation into the financial irregularities. In both of her last online posts, she could be seen with Kirkland Warren. When Monet Warren was questioned by police about the bank thefts, she implicated her husband, Kirkland, stating she had been changing account information on his behalf, as he had asked her to help him steal money. Kirkland, for his part, claimed he was in the process of divorcing Monet. His relationship with Meshay was also fraught with severe problems, culminating in a restraining order. The previous December, just a few months before her disappearance, Meshay had called 911 to report that Kirkland had assaulted her, an incident that reportedly included him firing shots at her balcony window while she was looking outside. In February, investigators had corroborated her story with a friend who was also present during that terrifying altercation. But a mere 2 weeks later, on February 17th, Meshay had unexpectedly recanted her accusation against Kirkland. She told authorities she had lied about the shooting and claimed that both she and her friend suffered from mental health and substance abuse problems. She effectively discredited herself and her previous report, and specifically asked the police to assure her that Kirkland wouldn't be arrested based on her initial claims. The police, however, found this sudden recantation highly suspicious. On March 2nd, Just 10 days before Meshay and Layla vanished, they arrested Kirkland Warren on a raft of serious charges, including second-degree domestic violence assault, drive-by shooting, making a false statement, harassment, and possession of a stolen firearm. The prosecutor at the time stated that Kirkland posed an extreme risk to Meshay's safety, with his risk assessment score being an alarming 31 on a scale where 18 is considered high risk. The judge consequently held him on bail of $100,000 and ordered a strict domestic violence no-contact order, prohibiting him from having any communication with Meshay. Kirkland Warren, however, violated this court order within only hours of its issuance. He called Meshay twice from the Clark County Jail, telling her that she was the reason he'd been arrested and that he urgently needed her to get the charges against him dropped. Meshay reportedly told him she was trying her best to do so. He was released on bail later that same day, but was cited in court again for violating the no-contact order. A higher bail amount and mandatory GPS monitoring was then ordered on March 6th. But, inexplicably, the very next day, the case against him was dismissed for reasons that remain unclear, and he was not fitted with a GPS monitor. He was, in effect, free without electronic surveillance. With this deeply troubled and violent history, Kirkland Warren was, quite naturally, the first and primary suspect the police looked to in their investigation of Meshay and Layla's disappearance. They served a search warrant for his house and his car, and on March 19th, they took him into custody again, this time based on the clear violation of the no-contact order. Body cam footage captured his arrest, with officers commanding him to show his hands and informing him he was under arrest for the violation. This arrest provided police the crucial opportunity to interview him at length about the whereabouts of Meshay and Layla. During the interview, the detective pressed Kirkland, "If you were me, where would you go looking for them? Where do you think Layla would go? Where would she want to be?" Kirkland evasively replied, "I don't know," and then attempted to deflect suspicion by suggesting that perhaps Meshay's ex-husband had something to do with it, claiming the ex had previously taken Layla and refused to return her for a couple of days. However, police had already visited the ex-husband and determined that Meshay and Layla were not with him. And crucially, unlike Kirkland, he didn't have an outstanding no-contact order against him related to Meshay. Kirkland presented himself to the detective as someone who, despite past troubles, was now trying to do better and was complying with the terms of his past run-ins with the law, a portrayal that investigators knew to be patently false. There was something else the investigators knew about Kirkland Warren, something that made him an even more suspicious and dangerous figure his past in Arkansas. Kirkland hadn't left Arkansas simply because he longed for the scenery of the western seaboard. He had fled another, even more serious criminal case, a murder. In November 2017, a 57-year-old man named Curtis Urquhart had gone missing in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Earlier that year, Urquhart himself had been charged with second-degree forgery and theft of property. His body was eventually discovered lying in a ditch by 3 men on December 11th. He had been shot in the head, and his body had been mutilated by wildlife. Curtis Urquhart had last been seen alive, leaving a law office with Kirkland Warren, then 22 years old, on November 27th. This immediately threw Kirkland under suspicion for Urquhart's murder, and police brought him in for an interview. During that interview, Kirkland Warren admitted he had killed Curtis Urquhart. That same December, his Google search history chillingly showed queries for how to get blood out of a car seat, how to beat murder, killing the only witness, and other searches related to getting away with murder. He claimed that he and Curtis had left a notary's office together and had been driving around when Curtis had started to aggressively demand money from him. Kirkland said he refused, but Curtis kept insisting, and he claimed he became scared for his life. He alleged he reached under the driver's seat of his vehicle, pulled out a handgun, and used it to shoot Curtis Urquhart in the head. He then, by his own admission, dumped Curtis's body in a ditch and drove away. Kirkland Warren was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse in Arkansas. He was released on a $250,000 bond and, at some point between 2018 and 2020, moved across the country from Arkansas to Washington State. There, far from obeying the terms of his bail conditions from Arkansas, he continued to violate them and engage in further criminal activity. In 2020, Vancouver police investigated him for possession of a stolen semi-automatic handgun, which he eventually surrendered to them. But the following March, he lied on an application to purchase another semi-automatic handgun, falsely stating that he wasn't under indictment for a felony. The application was denied. Yet, he managed to get hold of a gun somehow anyway, because in December 2022, he used a firearm to shoot at Meshay Melendez's balcony window. Kirkland's murder charge in Arkansas was still pending when Meshay and Layla disappeared. And now the suspicious vanishing of a mother and her young child was directly connected to his name. On March 17, 2023, the day before Meshay and Layla were officially reported missing by Meshay's mother, an Arkansas judge, likely informed of his ongoing issues in Washington, revoked his bail in the Curtis Urquhart murder case. On March 22nd, the same day he was being interrogated about Meshay and Layla, Kirkland appeared in court in Washington and admitted he was indeed wanted in Arkansas, but he initially refused to waive extradition to be turned over to the authorities there. The judge in Washington ordered that he be held without bail, and then, with a grim sense of inevitability, later that same day, 2 bodies were found. On that Wednesday morning, the Clark County Sheriff's Office received a call from someone who was walking on a rural road in nearby Washougal, Washington. The caller described what they initially believed to be 2 life-sized mannequins discarded down an embankment near a creek. But when deputies arrived on the remote scene, they made a horrifying discovery. 2 human bodies. Investigators quickly contacted Vancouver police, who determined that this was likely the tragic end they had feared for Meshay Melendez and her daughter, Layla Stewart. Both had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head. Meshay had been shot once, and little Layla had been shot twice. The autopsy would also reveal that Layla had been sexually assaulted. The investigators took this devastating discovery back to their interrogation of Kirkland Warren. The detective confronted him. "I know what road you were off of. I know why there's mud on your car." He urged Kirkland to confess, to at least give the family the peace of mind of knowing why this terrible thing had happened. Kirkland, however, continued to deny involvement and eventually asked for his attorney. But even without a full confession at that moment, the evidence against him was rapidly mounting and becoming overwhelming. On March 13th and 15th, in the days immediately following the disappearances, Kirkland had texted a friend asking if she knew of any secluded local areas, like woods, or a place where he could potentially bury a gun. On March 15th, he had also transferred $200 from Meshay Melendez's bank account to his own, using her phone to facilitate the transfer. He texted another friend on March 18th, saying, "I need to get rid of this stolo," with stolo being common slang for a stolen car. It was highly probable he was referring to the burgundy Dodge Charger that Meshay and Layla had last been seen in with him. A subsequent search of this car by police discovered damning evidence shell casings matching those that could have fired the fatal shots, a large blue tarp, and, most conclusively, both Meshay's and Layla's blood. It seemed horrifyingly certain that they had both been killed inside his car. Police then re-interviewed Joe, the friend with whom Meshay and Kirkland had reportedly been staying on the night of March 11th. Joe now stated that Meshay and Kirkland had both left her house at about 500 p.m. on March 12th, saying they were going out to make some money. Kirkland, she said, came back alone in his car at about 800 a.m., blasting loud music, with Meshay clearly visible in the passenger seat. According to Joe, Meshay was naked from the waist down and appeared to be passed out or unconscious. Joe reached into the car to turn the music down, and Kirkland angrily shouted at her to close the car door. But even then, she tragically didn't suspect something was catastrophically amiss. Fatefully, she handed young Layla and Layla's kitten, Rocky, over to Kirkland, who then drove off with the child and her deceased mother. Kirkland often took Layla to school, and the little girl reportedly trusted him like a father figure. When she got into his car that morning, she would have had no idea of the horror that was unfolding, and no idea that her beloved mom was already dead in the front seat beside her. Her young life, so full of promise, was about to be cruelly and senselessly snatched away. With all the evidence mounting against him, Kirkland Warren eventually had to change his story yet again. He then concocted a new claim that he had given Meshay a pistol to use to protect herself in her line of work, about which he remained deliberately vague. He alleged that on that fateful morning, they had been arguing in the car about his second cell phone, and that Meshay had fumbled with her gun during the heated conversation, accidentally shooting her daughter Layla twice, and then, in despair, fatally shooting herself. This was his new, desperate explanation. But it begged many questions. Why then try to hide the bodies? And it would be a truly unbelievable coincidence for the facts of this alleged tragic accident to so closely resemble the brutal 2017 murder of Curtis Urquhart in Arkansas, a murder to which Kirkland had already confessed. Ultimately, facing the overwhelming weight of evidence, Kirkland Warren had little choice but to plead guilty. He admitted to the murders of Layla Stewart and Meshay Melendez, and he entered an Alford plea, a plea that allows a defendant to maintain their innocence while acknowledging the prosecution has sufficient evidence for a conviction. To a charge of sexually assaulting Layla. For these heinous crimes, he was sentenced to life in prison. Meshay's family voiced their profound grief and anger, with Layla's father stating, "The 7 years I had with Layla was all I had, and it's all because of Kirkland Warren, and I want him to suffer every single day." Meshay's family also questioned why Kirkland had been allowed out on bail for the earlier domestic violence charge when he already had a murder case pending against him in another state, highlighting perceived failures in the legal system to protect victims of domestic violence. Kirkland Warren also subsequently pleaded guilty to Curtis Urquhart's murder in Arkansas. His sentence for this 7-year-old crime will run concurrently with the life sentence handed down for the killings of Layla and Meshay. And though Arkansas is a death penalty state, that ultimate punishment was reportedly taken off the table as part of his plea arrangements. The motive for the murders of Meshay and Layla remains officially unknown, though his interference in Meshay's bank accounts and the documented financial theft scheme involving his wife, Monet, suggest that financial gain was potentially a significant factor. Monet Tyler Warren eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree theft and 2 counts of attempted identity theft and was sentenced to 2 years of probation for her role. Kirkland Warren now begins his life sentence, but for the Clark County community, and especially for Meshay and Layla's heartbroken family, the pain and the questions will likely never fully fade.